the quiet corridors of corporate power, where million-dollar decisions are made behind closed doors, sometimes the most devastating blow comes not from the competition, but from within. What happens when the person you trust most walks away at the moment you need them the most?
And what if their return brings consequences no one could have predicted? The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Meridian Industries as Sarah Chen adjusted her navy blazer one final time before entering the boardroom.
At 34, she had clawed her way up from an entry-level analyst to the chief strategy officer of one of the city's most prestigious consulting firms. Today's presentation would either secure the Peterson manufacturing contract worth $12 million or end her career in spectacular fashion. The Peterson deal had been her baby for 8 months. She had personally courted their executives, analyzed their supply chain inefficiencies, and crafted a transformation strategy that would revolutionize their operations. More importantly, landing Peterson would position Meridian as the go-to firm for manufacturing giants across the region. The stakes couldn't be higher. Sarah's assistant Marcus Williams had been with her for 3 years. At 28, he possessed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate her needs, manage her schedule, and handle the intricate details that kept her professional life running smoothly. He was more than an assistant. He was her right hand, her trusted confidant, and the one person who knew every aspect of the Peterson proposal inside and out. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy as the Meridian team made final preparations. CEO Jonathan Hartwell paced near the windows, his silver hair catching the light as he reviewed his notes for the third time. The firm's senior partners occupied the mahogany table, each one acutely aware that this presentation would determine their year-end bonuses and the company's trajectory for the next 5 years. Sarah glanced at her watch. 9:47 a.m. The Peterson executives would arrive in 13 minutes, and Marcus still hadn't appeared with the final presentation materials. She had specifically asked him to bring the updated financial projections, the signed confidentiality agreements, and the backup slides they had prepared for potential questions about implementation timelines. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She expected to see Marcus's name on the screen, perhaps with an explanation for his delay. Instead, she found a message from an unknown number. Check your email. Everything you need to know about Marcus Williams. Sarah's stomach tightened as she opened her email application. The message from the same unknown sender contained a single attachment, a video file dated just hours earlier. Against her better judgment, she clicked play. The grainy security footage showed Marcus in what appeared to be a hotel lobby, speaking animatedly with 2 men in expensive suits. One of them she recognized immediately, Richard Patterson, the CEO of Peterson Manufacturing's biggest competitor, Apex Industrial Solutions. The timestamp showed 11:30 p.m. the previous night. Sarah's hands trembled as she watched Marcus hand Patterson a manila envelope. The video quality was poor, but the exchange was unmistakable. Patterson examined the contents, nodded approvingly, and shook Marcus's hand before the 3 men parted ways. The blood drained from Sarah's face. The envelope looked identical to the ones containing their Peterson proposal materials. Marcus had access to everything. Their pricing strategy, their implementation timeline, their competitive analysis, and most damaging of all, their confidential insights into Peterson's internal operations and weaknesses. Sarah, you look pale. Everything all right? Jonathan Hartwell's voice cut through her racing thoughts. She looked up to find the CEO and several partners staring at her with concern. The Peterson executives would arrive any moment, and she was holding evidence that her most trusted team member had potentially sold their entire strategy to the competition. Has anyone seen Marcus this morning? She managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt.
No, actually, replied Jennifer Walsh, the head of business development. I tried calling him about the Peterson materials, but it went straight to voicemail. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Without Marcus and the materials he was supposed to bring, she would have to improvise significant portions of the presentation. But more troubling was the possibility that Peterson Manufacturing had already received a competing proposal from Apex Industrial One based on Meridian's own research and insights. The conference room door opened, and Peterson's delegation entered. Richard Peterson, the company's founder and chairman, led the group with his characteristic confident stride. Behind him walked CFO Linda Morrison, Operations Director James Chen, and 2 other executives Sarah had met during previous meetings. "Good morning, everyone," Peterson announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had built a manufacturing empire from nothing. "I hope you're ready to show us why Meridian Industries deserves our business." Sarah forced a professional smile while her mind continued processing the ramifications of Marcus's betrayal. She had 2 choices:
Proceed with the presentation using whatever materials were available, and hope for the best, or confront the situation head-on and risk exposing her firm's internal security breach. Mr. Peterson, thank you for being here, she began, buying herself precious seconds to think. Before we dive into our presentation, I want to ensure we're addressing your most current needs and concerns.
We've been quite clear about our requirements, Miss Chen. Are you suggesting they've changed? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah realized this was her moment to gauge whether Peterson had already been approached by Apex Industrial. If Marcus had indeed sold their proposal, Peterson might be testing whether Meridian would present the same strategy he had already seen. Not at all, Sarah replied carefully. I simply want to confirm that no other consulting firms have presented preliminary proposals that might influence your decision-making process. A subtle exchange of glances passed between Peterson and his CFO. Linda Morrison leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. Miss Chen, are you asking if we're entertaining competing bids? Peterson's tone had cooled noticeably. Sarah felt the room's tension ratchet up another level. Jonathan Hartwell shot her a warning look, clearly concerned about where this line of questioning might lead. Mr. Peterson, in the interest of transparency, I want to ensure that any presentation we make today reflects our original strategic thinking rather than responding to proposals you might have seen elsewhere. Peterson's eyes narrowed. That's an interesting concern, Ms. Chen. What exactly are you suggesting? Before Sarah could respond, the conference room door burst open. Marcus Williams stumbled in, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled and his face flushed with apparent panic. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie askew, and his normally perfect hair looked like he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he gasped, clutching a leather briefcase against his chest.
There was an emergency. I had to. The materials are all here.
And that's a problem.
Every eye in the room turned toward Marcus, whose arrival had shifted the entire dynamic of the meeting. Sarah noticed that his hands were shaking as he set the briefcase on the conference table. Mr. Williams, Peterson said slowly, his voice carrying a weight that made Sarah's stomach drop. How unexpected to see you here. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Peterson knew Marcus. The casual familiarity in the CEO's tone suggested this wasn't their first encounter. Marcus's face went white. Mr. Peterson, this is Marcus, Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp with authority and suspicion. Where exactly were you last night? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus looked back and forth between Sarah and Peterson, his panic now obvious to everyone in the room. The other Peterson executives watched the exchange with growing interest, as if they were witnessing the unraveling of something they had expected. There was a family emergency, Marcus stammered. My mother was in the hospital and I had to drive to Philadelphia. My phone died and I couldn't charge it until this morning. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him the video footage. Then perhaps you can explain this. Marcus stared at the screen, his face cycling through expressions of shock, fear, and resignation. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning system. I can explain, Marcus began, but his voice trailed off as he seemed to realize the futility of denial. Peterson Manufacturing's chairman stood slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the conference table. Ms. Chen, it appears your organization has some internal matters to address. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. Mr. Peterson, please, Sarah said, fighting to maintain her composure. Whatever has happened here, it doesn't reflect the quality of our work or our commitment to your project, doesn't it? Peterson replied coldly. Ms. Chen, 3 hours ago, Apex Industrial Solutions presented us with a strategy proposal that bears remarkable similarities to what we discussed in our preliminary meetings with your firm. They seemed to have insights into our operations that we shared only with Meridian Industries. The admission hit the room like a thunderbolt. Sarah felt her career aspirations crumbling around her as the full scope of Marcus's betrayal became clear. However, Peterson continued, his tone shifting slightly, there's something you should know about that meeting. Sarah looked up, confused by the change in his demeanor. Apex Industrial's presentation was impressive in its detail and accuracy, almost too accurate, if you understand my meaning. They knew things about our internal processes that even some of our own executives weren't aware we had discussed with you. Peterson walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of Marcus, who seemed to shrink under the older man's gaze. Mr. Williams, would you like to tell Miss Chen what really happened last night? Or shall I? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. The leather briefcase in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. You see, Miss Chen, Peterson continued, when someone tries to sell us information, we have a choice. We can either buy it and compromise our integrity, or we can investigate why they're selling it in the first place. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process Peterson's words.
Are you saying that Apex Industrial? Apex Industrial contacted us yesterday morning, Peterson confirmed. They claim to have insider information about Meridian's proposal and offered to share it in exchange for our business. We agreed to meet with them, but not for the reasons they assumed. The conference room fell completely silent. Even Jonathan Hartwell had stopped pacing and was staring at Peterson with rapt attention. We recorded everything, Peterson said simply. Every word of their presentation. Every piece of proprietary information they claimed to have obtained, and every unethical business practice they suggested we overlook. Marcus finally found his voice. Mr. Peterson, I never meant for this to happen. They approached me and they said what, Mr. Williams? Peterson's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to getting straight answers. They said that Meridian was going to lose the contract anyway. Marcus whispered. They said that Peterson Manufacturing had already decided to go with Apex Industrial, and that the presentation today was just a formality. They offered me $50,000 for the proposal materials, and promised me a job with their firm. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. $50,000. Marcus had been willing to destroy her career, betray the company that had employed and trusted him, and compromise a $12 million contract for $50,000. And you believed them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at her with tears in his eyes. Sarah, I've been struggling financially. My mother really is sick, and the medical bills. I thought if the contract was already lost, at least I could get something out of it and help pay for her treatment. The human element of Marcus's betrayal made it somehow worse. Sarah understood financial desperation, but she couldn't comprehend how he had convinced himself that selling out his employer was justified. Mr. Williams, Peterson said, his tone becoming almost gentle. Your mother's medical situation is unfortunate, but it doesn't excuse what you attempted to do. However, there's something else you should know. Peterson returned to his seat and opened a folder he had brought with him. Apex Industrial never had any intention of hiring you. The $50,000 they promised, the money was contingent on Peterson Manufacturing awarding them the contract based on the information you provided. If we had chosen Meridian despite their industrial espionage, you would have received nothing. Marcus's face crumpled as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. Furthermore, Peterson continued, we conducted a background check on the individuals who approached you. They have a history of this type of corporate espionage. You weren't their first target, Mr. Williams, and you wouldn't have been their last. Sarah watched Marcus process this information, seeing him realize that he had been played by professionals who had identified his vulnerabilities and exploited them ruthlessly. Mr. Peterson, Sarah said finally, what happens now? Peterson looked around the conference room, making eye contact with each person present. Now, Ms. Chen, you have a choice to make. Your firm's security has been compromised, your proposal materials have been stolen, and your assistant has attempted to commit corporate espionage. You can either address this situation professionally and continue with your presentation, or we can end this meeting and you can deal with the internal ramifications privately. Sarah looked at Marcus, who was staring at his hands in shame. She thought about the months of work that had gone into the Peterson proposal, the dozen employees whose jobs depended on landing major contracts, and her own career aspirations. But more than that, she thought about the type of leader she wanted to be, and the type of company Meridian Industries needed to become. Mr. Peterson, she said, standing up and walking to where Marcus sat, I appreciate your transparency and your professionalism in handling this situation. However, before we continue, I need to address something with my team. She placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder, feeling him flinch at the contact. Marcus, I need you to give me the briefcase, and then wait outside. We'll deal with the personal and legal ramifications of this situation later, but right now I have a presentation to give. Marcus looked up at her with a mixture of gratitude and shame. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you or the company. I know, she said quietly. We'll figure it out later. Right now, I need you to go.
Marcus handed her the briefcase and walked toward the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat.
As the door closed behind him, Sarah took a deep breath and turned back to face the Peterson executives. Mr. Tomokata bleeds itself. Peterson, gentlemen, I apologize for what you just witnessed. However, I want you to know that Meridian Industries takes corporate security and client confidentiality extremely seriously. What happened here today will result in significant changes to our internal protocols. Peterson nodded approvingly. Ms. Chen, How you handle crises often reveals more about a company's character than how you handle success.
Please continue with your presentation. Sarah opened the briefcase and began removing the presentation materials, her hands steadier now than they had been all morning. Whatever happened next, she would face it head-on, with integrity and professionalism. The Peterson contract was still within reach, but more importantly, she had just learned something valuable about leadership, trust, and the price of both. Sarah took a steadying breath as she arranged the presentation materials on the conference table. The weight of what had just transpired hung heavy in the air, but she forced herself to focus on the task ahead. The Peterson executives watched her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, clearly impressed by how she had handled the crisis with Marcus. "Gentlemen," she began, activating the wall-mounted display screen, "what you're about to see represents 8 months of intensive research, analysis, and strategic planning specifically tailored to Peterson Manufacturing's unique challenges and opportunities." The first slide illuminated the screen showing Peterson Manufacturing's current operational structure alongside projected improvements. Sarah had memorized every detail of this presentation, but without Marcus's organizational skills, she would need to rely entirely on her own preparation and expertise. "Your current production efficiency stands at 78%, which is respectable for the industry, but leaves significant room for improvement," she continued. Clicking to the next slide. "Our analysis indicates that through strategic process optimization and technology integration, we can increase that efficiency to 92% within 18 months. Richard Peterson leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "Mrs. Chen, those are impressive projections. How do you propose to achieve such dramatic improvements without disrupting our current operations?" Sarah felt a surge of confidence. This was her domain. Strategic analysis and implementation planning. Marcus's betrayal couldn't diminish her expertise or the quality of her work. "The key lies in our phased implementation approach," she explained, advancing to a detailed timeline chart. "Rather than attempting wholesale changes that could disrupt your production schedules, we propose implementing improvements in 3 distinct phases, each building upon the success of the previous one." She walked to the screen and pointed to the first phase outlined in blue. "Phase 1 focuses on your supply chain optimization. Our analysis revealed that Peterson Manufacturing currently maintains relationships with 47 different suppliers across 12 product categories. By consolidating to 28 strategic partnerships and implementing just-in-time inventory management, we can reduce your carrying costs by 35% while improving delivery reliability." CFO Linda Morrison pulled out her tablet and began taking notes. "What about the risk of supply disruption with fewer suppliers?" "Excellent question," Sarah replied, advancing to a risk mitigation slide she had prepared specifically for this concern. "Each strategic supplier partnership includes backup capacity agreements and geographical diversification requirements. Additionally, we recommend maintaining emergency supplier relationships for critical components, effectively creating a 3-tier supply system that balances efficiency with security." Operations Director James Chen raised his hand. "Ms. Chen, you mentioned technology integration. What specific systems are you recommending and how do they integrate with our existing infrastructure?" Sarah felt a moment of uncertainty. The detailed technology specifications were in a supplementary presentation that Marcus was supposed to have prepared. She would need to draw on her general knowledge and hope the fundamentals would satisfy their initial questions. "Our technology recommendations focus on 3 core areas," she began, buying herself time to organize her thoughts. "First, we propose implementing an integrated enterprise resource planning system that connects your production scheduling, inventory management, and quality control processes. This creates real-time visibility across your entire operation." She paused, gauging their reactions. Peterson Manufacturing's executives were nodding approvingly, encouraging her to continue. "Second, we recommend upgrading your production floor monitoring systems to include predictive maintenance capabilities. By analyzing machine performance data, we can identify potential equipment failures before they occur, reducing unplanned downtime by an estimated 60%.
Richard Peterson interrupted. "What's your estimate for the initial technology investment?"
Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The specific technology costs were in the financial projections that Marcus was supposed to bring. She would need to provide a reasonable estimate based on her experience with similar projects. "Mr.
Peterson, based on your current infrastructure and production capacity, we estimate the initial technology investment at approximately $2.4 million, spread across the first 12 months of implementation," she said, hoping her calculation was reasonably accurate. "And the return on investment timeline?" pressed Linda Morrison. "Our projections show full cost recovery within 26 months,
with annual savings exceeding $1.8 million thereafter. Sarah replied, drawing on her memory of the financial models she had developed. The Peterson executives exchanged glances, and Sarah noticed subtle nods of approval around the table. Despite the morning's chaos, her presentation was gaining traction.
Chen, said James Chen, you mentioned Phase 2 and Phase 3 implementations.
Can you elaborate on those strategies? Sarah advanced to the next section of her presentation, feeling more confident with each passing minute. Phase 2 addresses your workforce optimization and training programs.
Our analysis indicates that Peterson Manufacturing's employee retention rate of 86% is above industry average, but your productivity per employee lags behind comparable organizations by approximately 12%.
She clicked to a slide showing comparative productivity metrics. This gap isn't due to any deficiency in your workforce's capabilities, but rather to inconsistencies in training programs and process standardization across different shifts and departments. Richard Peterson nodded thoughtfully. We've suspected as much. What do you propose? We recommend implementing a comprehensive skills development program that includes cross-training initiatives, standardized operating procedures, and performance incentive structures tied to both individual and team achievements, Sarah explained. Additionally, we propose creating internal leadership development tracks that promote from within while ensuring consistent management practices across all departments. One of the executives Sarah hadn't met before spoke up. What about the cost of these training programs? And how do you measure their effectiveness? Sarah recognized this as Tom Bradley, Peterson Manufacturing's Human Resources Director, whom she had researched but never met in person. Mr. Bradley, the training investment totals approximately $400,000 annually, but our projections show a return of over $3 for every dollar invested through reduced turnover, increased productivity, and improved quality metrics, she responded.
How do you measure improved quality? Bradley pressed. Sarah advanced to a slide showing quality metrics and improvement tracking systems. We propose implementing statistical process control measures that track defect rates, customer satisfaction scores, and internal quality audits. Additionally, we recommend establishing quality circles where employees contribute to continuous improvement initiatives.
Linda Morrison looked up from her tablet.
Mrs. Chen, these first two phases sound comprehensive, but what does Phase 3 entail? Sarah felt a surge of excitement as she reached what she considered the most innovative part of their proposal. Phase 3 represents our strategic growth recommendations, the initiatives that will position Peterson Manufacturing not just as a more efficient operation, but as an industry leader.
She advanced to a slide showing market expansion opportunities. Our market analysis identified 3 key growth vectors that align with your existing capabilities while opening new revenue streams. Richard Peterson leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued. Go on. First, we identified opportunities in the emerging sustainable manufacturing sector. Environmental regulations are increasingly driving demand for eco-friendly production methods, and Peterson Manufacturing is uniquely positioned to capitalize on this trend, Sarah explained. She clicked to a slide showing environmental impact projections. By investing in sustainable technologies and obtaining relevant certifications, Peterson Manufacturing can access a market segment that commands premium pricing while differentiating from competitors who haven't embraced environmental responsibility.
What kind of premium pricing are we talking about? Asked Linda Morrison. Our research indicates that certified sustainable manufacturers in your sector command prices 12 to 18% higher than conventional producers, with major corporate clients increasingly requiring sustainable supply chain partnerships, Sarah replied.
James Chen raised his hand. What about the certification costs and timeline? Sarah had anticipated this question during her preparation. Initial certification investments range from $600,000 to $1.2 million, depending on the scope of environmental upgrades required.
However, the certification process can be completed within 8 to 12 months, and the premium pricing typically covers the investment costs within the first 18 months. Richard Peterson nodded approvingly.
What are the other growth vectors? Sarah advanced to the next slide. The second opportunity involves expanding into adjacent product categories that leverage your existing manufacturing capabilities. Our analysis identified 3 specific product lines where Peterson Manufacturing could achieve rapid market entry with minimal additional capital investment. She detailed each opportunity, explaining how Peterson's current equipment and expertise could be adapted to produce complementary products that serve their existing customer base while attracting new clients.
The third growth vector focuses on strategic partnerships and potential acquisitions, Sarah continued.
We identified 12 smaller manufacturers in related sectors that could be acquired or partnered with to expand Peterson Manufacturing's geographic reach and production capacity. As Sarah progressed through the presentation, she noticed the Peterson executives becoming increasingly engaged. They were asking detailed questions, taking extensive notes, and exchanging the kind of meaningful glances that suggested genuine interest in her proposals. However, she also became aware of a growing concern.
The presentation was going well. Perhaps better than she had originally hoped, but she was operating without several key supporting documents that Marcus was supposed to have provided. If the Peterson executives requested specific financial models, detailed implementation timelines, or comprehensive risk assessments, she might not have the documentation to support her verbal explanations.
Chen, Richard Peterson said as she concluded the main presentation, "What you've presented today is impressive and thorough. However, we have some additional questions that require detailed documentation." Sarah's stomach tightened. This was the moment she had been dreading.
Of course, Mr. Peterson.
What specific information can I provide? Linda Morrison consulted her tablet. We need to see detailed cash flow projections for each phase of implementation, including month-by-month breakdowns of costs and anticipated savings. Sarah nodded, hoping her expression remained confident. Absolutely. Those projections are in our supplementary financial documentation. James Chen added, we also need comprehensive risk assessments for each technology implementation, including contingency planning for potential system failures or integration difficulties. Of course, Sarah replied, though she wasn't entirely certain Marcus had prepared those specific documents. Tom Bradley spoke up.
Taya.
The workforce development programs sound excellent, but we need to see detailed curricula, training schedules, and measurable performance indicators for each component. Sarah felt perspiration forming on her forehead. Their requests were reasonable and expected, but she was increasingly uncertain about whether the supporting documentation existed in the forms they were requesting. Gentlemen, she said, buying herself time to think, all of those detailed supporting documents are available. However, I want to ensure you receive the most current versions, which may require some updating based on our discussion today.
Richard Peterson studied her carefully.
About Chen, are you saying the supporting documentation isn't available right now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah realized she had reached a critical decision point. She could attempt to bluff her way through, hoping the documents existed in Marcus's briefcase or that she could somehow delay until she could prepare them. Alternatively, she could acknowledge the situation honestly and deal with the consequences. Mr. Peterson, she said finally, I want to be completely transparent with you. The events of this morning have created some uncertainties about the organization of our supporting documentation. While I'm confident all the information you're requesting exists, I want to verify that you receive complete and accurate materials rather than potentially incomplete or outdated versions.
The Peterson executives exchanged glances and Sarah held her breath waiting for their response. Miss Semyon.
Chen, Richard Peterson said slowly, we appreciate your honesty. How much time do you need to organize the supporting materials? Sarah felt a wave of relief. I can have complete documentation to you within 24 hours. That's acceptable, Peterson replied. However, we have one additional request. Sarah nodded, waiting for whatever condition they were about to impose.
We want you to present the final proposal personally to our full board of directors, including the detailed supporting documentation. This contract represents a significant investment for Peterson Manufacturing, and our board wants to evaluate not just the proposal itself, but the team that would be implementing it. The request was both an opportunity and a challenge. Presenting to Peterson Manufacturing's board would be the highest stakes presentation of Sarah's career, but it would also be her chance to demonstrate her expertise without the complications that had plagued this morning's meeting.
Mr. Peterson, I would be honored to present to your board, she said. When would you like to schedule that presentation? Next Friday morning at 9 o'clock, he replied. That gives you a full week to prepare the supporting documentation and refine your presentation based on today's discussion. As the Peterson executives prepared to leave, Richard Peterson approached Sarah privately. Ms. Priest Chen, I want you to know that how you handled the situation with your assistant impressed everyone in this room, he said quietly. Leadership isn't just about making good presentations or developing sound strategies. It's about how you respond when things go wrong. Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and determination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peterson. I hope next week's presentation will demonstrate both our strategic capabilities and our commitment to excellence. After the Peterson team departed, Sarah found herself alone in the conference room with her Meridian colleagues. Jonathan Hartwell looked exhausted.
Jennifer Walsh appeared concerned, and the other partners seemed uncertain about what had just transpired. Sarah, Jonathan began, "We need to discuss what happened with Marcus and how it affects our position with Peterson Manufacturing." She had salvaged the Peterson presentation and secured an opportunity to present to their board, but significant challenges remained. Marcus's betrayal had created legal and security issues that needed to be addressed. The supporting documentation needed to be completed and verified, and she had to prepare for the most important presentation of her career.
As she gathered her materials, Sarah realized that the morning's crisis had revealed both the vulnerabilities in Meridian Industries' operations and her own capabilities as a leader.
The next week would determine whether she could transform this near disaster into the breakthrough opportunity that would define her career. The week following the Peterson Manufacturing presentation became the most intense period of Sarah Chen's professional life.
After the executives departed, she spent the remainder of that day in damage control mode, working with Jonathan Hartwell and the senior partners to address the immediate consequences of Marcus Williams' attempted betrayal. The first priority was securing Meridian Industries' intellectual property and client information.
Sarah worked with the IT department to conduct a comprehensive audit of Marcus's access to company systems, documents, and databases. They discovered that beyond the Peterson materials, Marcus had downloaded files related to 6 other major client proposals, raising concerns about the scope of potential damage. "We need to assume that everything Marcus had access to has been compromised," Jonathan Hartwell said during an emergency meeting with the senior partners. "Sarah, I need you to prepare a list of all clients who might be affected and develop a communication strategy."
Meridian's general counsel recommended filing charges against Marcus for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets while also pursuing legal action against Apex Industrial Solutions for their role in the scheme. However, such actions would inevitably become public, potentially damaging Meridian's reputation and raising questions about their internal security among current and prospective clients.
Sarah found herself at the center of these discussions not just as the victim of Marcus's betrayal but as a senior executive whose recommendations would influence the company's response. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but she recognized it as an opportunity to demonstrate her judgment and leadership capabilities. On Tuesday morning, 3 days before the Peterson board presentation, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Williams appeared at the Meridian offices looking haggard and desperate. Security initially refused to let him enter, but Sarah agreed to meet with him in a conference room under supervision.
"Sarah, I know you probably never want to see me again," Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed to come here and try to make things right." The confident, impeccably dressed professional she had known was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days.
"Marcus, I don't know what you think you can do at this point,"
she said carefully.
"You betrayed not just me but everyone at this company. You put our clients at risk and potentially damaged our reputation."
"I know," Marcus replied, tears forming in his eyes. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can help minimize the damage."
He reached into his jacket and produced a small recording device.
"I recorded everything," he said. "Every conversation with the Apex Industrial representatives, every document they asked for, every instruction they gave me.
I was scared they might try to blame me for things I didn't do, so I kept evidence." Sarah stared at the device, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Are you telling me you have recordings of Apex Industrial's representatives soliciting industrial espionage?" Marcus nodded. "Not just soliciting it, planning it. They bragged about other companies they had infiltrated, other employees they had recruited. They have a whole system for identifying targets and exploiting people's financial vulnerabilities." Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with caution.
If Marcus's recordings were authentic and legally admissible, they could transform Meridian from victim to potential catalyst for exposing a broader pattern of corporate espionage. "Marcus, why are you bringing this to me now?" "Because I realized something after Peterson Manufacturing exposed what Apex Industrial was really doing," he said.
"I wasn't their first target, and I won't be their last. They're going to keep destroying careers and companies unless someone stops them."
Sarah called Jonathan Hartwell and the legal team immediately. Within 2 hours, they had verified the authenticity of Marcus's recordings and confirmed their potential legal value.
The recordings contained detailed discussions of Apex Industrial's espionage activities, including references to ongoing operations targeting other consulting firms and manufacturing companies. "This changes everything," Jonathan said after reviewing the legal team's preliminary assessment.
"We're not just dealing with one rogue employee anymore. We're looking at evidence of systematic corporate espionage that could involve federal crimes."
The revelation created new opportunities and complications. Meridian Industries could potentially become a key witness in a federal investigation, which might provide some protection against reputation damage while positioning them as champions of ethical business practices.
However, it also meant that the Peterson board presentation would take place under the shadow of ongoing legal proceedings. On Wednesday, 2 days before the presentation, Sarah received another surprise.
Richard Peterson called her directly rather than going through official channels. Ms. Chen, I hope you'll forgive the informal communication, but I wanted to speak with you personally about Friday's presentation, he said. Sarah felt her pulse quicken.
Of course, Mr. Peterson.
Is there anything specific you need me to address? Actually, it's about the broader situation with your assistant in Apex Industrial Solutions, Peterson replied. Word has gotten around in our industry about what happened, and I thought you should know that Peterson Manufacturing isn't the only company that has been approached by Apex Industrial.
The news hit Sarah like a revelation. If Apex Industrial had targeted multiple companies in the manufacturing sector, it suggested their espionage activities were far more extensive than anyone had initially realized.
Mr. Peterson, are you saying other companies have been approached with stolen information? I'm saying that when our board meets on Friday, they're going to be very interested in hearing about more than just your consulting proposal, Peterson said. They want to understand how Meridian Industries handled a crisis, what it reveals about your company's character, and whether your firm is the kind of partner they want for the long term.
The implication was clear. The board presentation had evolved beyond a typical business proposal into a test of Sarah's leadership and Meridian's integrity under pressure.
Thursday evening, Sarah worked until midnight putting the finishing touches on her presentation materials. The supporting documentation was comprehensive and detailed, but she had also prepared an additional section addressing the Marcus Williams situation and its broader implications for corporate security and ethical business practices.
She had decided to be completely transparent about what had happened, how Meridian had responded, and what they had learned from the experience. It was a risky strategy that could backfire if the Peterson board viewed the security breach as evidence of poor management.
However, Sarah believed that honesty and accountability were more likely to build trust than any attempt to minimize or deflect responsibility.
Friday morning arrived with unseasonable clarity and crisp air. Sarah arrived at Peterson Manufacturing's headquarters an hour early, using the time to review her materials one final time and mentally prepare for what she knew would be the most important presentation of her career. 7 days as headquarters also shows the problem. The Peterson Manufacturing boardroom was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and a polished conference table that could seat 20 people. Board members filed in gradually, each one projecting the kind of confidence and authority that came from years of successful business leadership.
Richard Peterson introduced Sarah to each board member individually, giving her a chance to make personal connections before beginning her formal presentation. She recognized several names from industry publications, and realized she was presenting to some of the most influential leaders in the regional manufacturing sector.
Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Peterson announced as the meeting came to order. Ms. Sarah Chen from Meridian Industries is here to present their strategic consulting proposal.
However, before we discuss the business aspects of their proposal, I want to address the unusual circumstances that brought us to today's meeting. Peterson briefly summarized the events of the previous week, including Marcus's attempted betrayal, Apex Industrial's espionage activities, and the evidence that had subsequently emerged about the broader scope of corporate espionage in their industry.
Ms. Chen, Peterson concluded, the board would like you to begin by addressing how Meridian Industries handled this crisis and what it reveals about your company's approach to challenges and ethical standards. Sarah stood, feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes focused on her.
This was her moment to transform a near disaster into a demonstration of leadership and integrity. Thank you, Mr. Califad, Peterson. Board members, what happened last week was simultaneously one of the most challenging and most revealing experiences of my career, she began. She detailed the timeline of events, from discovering Marcus's betrayal to managing the immediate crisis during the initial presentation.
She explained how Meridian had responded to protect their clients' interests, addressed security vulnerabilities, and cooperated with law enforcement investigations. The easy response would have been to cover up the situation, minimize our exposure, and hope it didn't affect our business relationships, Sarah continued.
However, we believe that integrity under pressure is what distinguishes exceptional organizations from merely competent ones. She advanced to a slide showing the comprehensive security improvements Meridian had implemented in response to the crisis.
We've used this experience to strengthen our operations in ways that will benefit all our clients. New security protocols, enhanced background screening procedures, and improved information access controls ensure that what happened with Marcus Williams cannot happen again. Board member Elizabeth Hawkins, whom Sarah recognized as the former CEO of a major logistics company, raised her hand.
Miss?
Chen, this all sounds very responsible, but how do we know that Meridian Industries can be trusted with confidential information going forward? Your security was already compromised once.
Sarah had anticipated this challenge and was prepared with a comprehensive response. Ms.
Hawkins, that's an excellent question that goes to the heart of what this experience has taught us about trust and accountability, she replied. The reality is that no organization is immune to the kind of targeted espionage that Apex Industrial was conducting.
What matters is how quickly you detect threats, how effectively you respond to them, and how thoroughly you address vulnerabilities. She clicked to a slide showing comparative security measures. Our investigation revealed that Apex Industrial had successfully infiltrated at least 6 other consulting firms using similar methods. In every other case, the espionage continued for months or years before being detected. In our case, we identified and addressed the threat within 24 hours. Another board member, Thomas McKenna, spoke up. What about the legal proceedings? How does ongoing litigation affect our potential business relationship? Sarah had worked with Meridian's legal team to prepare for this question.
Mr. McKenna, Meridian Industries is cooperating fully with federal investigators, but we are not defendants in any legal action. We are victims who are helping to expose a broader pattern of corporate espionage that threatens the entire consulting industry.
She advanced to a slide showing the scope of the federal investigation that had grown out of Marcus's recordings. The evidence we provided has led to investigations of espionage activities targeting dozens of companies across multiple industries. By standing up to these practices, we're helping to protect not just our own clients, but the integrity of business relationships throughout the sector.
Richard Peterson nodded approvingly.
Ms. Chen, please proceed with your consulting proposal.
Sarah spent the next 90 minutes presenting her strategic recommendations for Peterson Manufacturing, fielding detailed questions about implementation timelines, cost projections, and expected outcomes. The presentation went smoothly, with board members asking sophisticated questions that demonstrated genuine interest in her proposals.
However, the most significant moment came during the final question period. Ms. Chen, asked Board Chair Margaret Stevenson, if we award this contract to Meridian Industries, who would be your primary point of contact for day-to-day coordination? Sarah realized that this question was really about Marcus Williams and whether she had learned from the experience of trusting too much responsibility to a single individual. Stevenson, we would establish a 3-person client management team with complementary skills and overlapping responsibilities. No single individual would have access to all client information or sole responsibility for critical deliverables. This approach ensures continuity, provides quality control through multiple perspectives, and eliminates the single point of failure that created our vulnerability. Margaret Stevenson smiled. That sounds like wisdom gained through experience. As the presentation concluded, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. She had addressed the crisis honestly and comprehensively, while demonstrating that the experience had made Meridian Industries stronger and more trustworthy, not weaker. The board deliberated for 45 minutes before calling her back into the boardroom. Chen, Richard Peterson announced. Peterson Manufacturing's board has voted unanimously to award the strategic consulting contract to Meridian Industries. Sarah felt a surge of triumph and relief. But Peterson wasn't finished. However, we're not just awarding you the contract we originally discussed. Based on your presentation and the strength of character your company demonstrated during the crisis, we want to expand the engagement to include strategic consulting for 2 of our subsidiary companies as well. The expanded contract was worth over $20 million, making it the largest single-client engagement in Meridian Industries' history. Furthermore, added Margaret Stevenson, Peterson Manufacturing will be recommending Meridian Industries to our industry partners as consultants who can be trusted with confidential information and who demonstrate integrity under pressure. As Sarah left Peterson Manufacturing's headquarters, she reflected on the extraordinary week that had transformed her career and her understanding of leadership. Marcus Williams' betrayal had initially seemed like a catastrophic threat to everything she had worked to achieve. Instead, it had become the crucible that proved her capabilities and established her reputation as a leader who could be trusted with the most challenging situations. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Services, a newly created position that made her responsible for Meridian Industries' most important client relationships. Marcus Williams had pleaded guilty to corporate espionage charges and was serving an 18-month federal sentence while cooperating with ongoing investigations into Apex Industrial Solutions. The Apex Industrial case had grown into one of the largest corporate espionage prosecutions in recent history. with Marcus's recordings providing crucial evidence that led to criminal charges against 12 individuals and the dissolution of Apex Industrial Solutions. Sarah never forgot the lesson that crisis reveals character. The 30 minutes when Marcus Williams left his position and the enemy disappeared had taught her that true leadership isn't about preventing all problems, but about responding to them with integrity, wisdom, and determination to emerge stronger than before.
The Peterson manufacturing contract became a cornerstone of Meridian Industries' growth, leading to dozens of referrals and establishing the firm as the premier strategic consulting company in the region.
But for Sarah, the greatest victory was the knowledge that when tested under the most challenging circumstances, she had proven worthy of the trust that clients, colleagues, and competitors placed in her. The enemy that had threatened to destroy her career had indeed disappeared, but not because of Marcus Williams' return. It had disappeared because Sarah Chen had discovered that her greatest strength wasn't her analytical skills or strategic thinking, but her unwavering commitment to doing what was right even when it was difficult.